No one has ever told you this directly, but overthinking is ruining your life. And the worst part is, you call it intelligence. You believe you're being careful, strategic, someone who analyzes before acting, but in practice you're just stuck, trapped in a cycle where your mind creates problems, solves problems that don't exist, and still convinces you that this is progress. It's not. It's a sophisticated trap. A policy guided by reality, not by ideals, but by a distorted reality, fabricated inside your own head. If you stop for a second and observe, you'll realize that almost nothing you fear is actually happening. It's all in your mind. Scenarios, judgments, imaginary dialogues, future versions of something that may never happen. And meanwhile, your real life is passing you by. You're not living, you're rehearsing. Rehearsing answers, rehearsing decisions, rehearsing who you should be. And here comes an uncomfortable truth, almost in the style of Machiavelli. The end justifies the means, and your brain uses any means necessary to keep you in control, even if it costs you your freedom. Now let me really challenge you. What if the problem isn't the world out there, but the way you're thinking about it? What if everything you call personality, way of being, who I am, is just a set of repeated mental patterns? Because if it is, then there is a way out. And it has nothing to do with thinking more, planning more, or trying to control everything. On the contrary, your life begins the moment you stop identifying with every thought that passes through your mind. And that's what you're going to understand now. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos. It's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He doesn't even realize when it begins. The voice emerges low, almost like a whisper. You're not good enough. This will go wrong. Look what they'll think of you. And without realizing it, he begins to obey. Like an invisible advisor, this voice takes command of decisions, shapes behaviors, and creates a kind of internal policy guided by reality. But not true reality. Rather, a distorted version of it. This is where many people get lost. They confuse this narration with their own identity. But in practice, this voice functions as a cruel, almost Machiavellian strategist who believes that the end justifies the means, even if the means is to keep you small, insecure, and paralyzed. It promises protection, but delivers paralysis. And the most dangerous thing, it does this using your own language, as if it were you talking to yourself. It's not. Over time, this voice begins to build an internal empire. It creates automatic judgments, distorted interpretations, and scenarios that never existed. A simple silence from someone becomes rejection. A small mistake becomes proof of incompetence. It's as if there's a narrator commenting on every movement, every choice, every attempt, and almost always with a negative bias. And that's where an ancient, almost invisible, but extremely powerful principle comes in. It's better to be feared than loved. This voice prefers to keep you under control through fear rather than let you be free to act. Because deep down, it doesn't want evolution. It wants predictability. You want to avoid risks at all costs. And ironically, in trying to avoid error, it creates the biggest mistake of all, inertia. You start to stop acting, not because you can't, but because you believe you shouldn't. Now observe this in practice. He's about to start something new, a project, a video, an important conversation, and even before taking the first step, the voice kicks in. It's not the right time. You're not ready yet. Someone already does this better. See? It's not a lack of ability, it's an excess of noise. It's like trying to command an army with multiple generals giving orders at the same time, and none of them are truly committed to the outcome. The appearance of virtue here is deceptive. It looks like prudence, it looks like intelligence, it looks like caution, but in essence it's fear disguised as logic. And while he continues to listen to this voice as if it were an authority, he doesn't even realize he's being manipulated by an internal system that was never designed to help him grow, only to keep him safe. But there's a detail that's starting to bother him. If this voice is talking all the time, who is listening? He wakes up, grabs his phone, and before he even feels his own body, he's already somewhere else, or rather, in another time. His mind races to yesterday, that conversation that could have been different, that mistake that won't leave his head or shoots off to tomorrow, creating scenarios that don't even exist yet. And so, without realizing it, he becomes a visitor in his own life. He's there physically but mentally absent. It's like a ghost occupying his own body. And the most curious thing, this constant escape seems intelligent, as if he were preparing, analyzing, learning from the past. But in practice, it's just a disguised strategy, a kind of internal policy guided by reality, but not by lofty ideals, but rather by silent fears. Because when the mind can't control the present, it tries to dominate time. This pattern repeats itself in everything. He's talking to someone, but he's not really listening. He's already thinking about what he's going to say, or remembering something similar that happened before. He's working, but his mind is projecting a future where everything could go wrong. He's resting, but he feels guilty for not being productive. In other words, he's never fully present. And this has a high cost, because decisions based on real human nature require presence, perception, and an understanding of the environment. Without this, he starts acting automatically, reacting to thoughts instead of responding to reality. It's like playing chess, looking only at past or possible moves, but ignoring the current board. And then, inevitably, he loses. Not for lack of intelligence, but for lack of presence. Now think of something simple. He's walking down the street and suddenly remembers an embarrassing situation from years ago. His body reacts as if it were happening now. Tension, shame, discomfort. Or he imagines a future problem, a debt, a difficult conversation, and his heart races as if it were already real. Do you see the game? The brain doesn't distinguish so well between what is happening and what is being imagined. And the inner voice masterfully exploits this, using a kind of distorted virtu and fortuna. It creates scenarios, tests possibilities, simulates threats, all to maintain control. But this control is illusory, because while he lives trapped between the past and the future, the only place where something can truly be done, the present, is completely ignored. And then an uncomfortable question arises. If he's not here, who is living for him? There's a precise moment when everything happens, the raw, direct fact, without interpretation, an unanswered message, a sideways glance, a plan gone wrong. That's the first arrow, quick, objective, inevitable. But what truly destroys isn't the arrow itself, it's what comes after. It's when he takes this simple event and starts building a narrative on top of it. I was ignored. I'm not important. This always happens to me. And that's it. The second arrow has been fired, slower, deeper, more venomous. And unlike the first, this one he created himself. This is where the game changes, because while the first arrow belongs to the world, the second belongs to the mind. And this mind, as you've already noticed, doesn't play fair. It follows a cold logic, almost as Niccolo Machiavelli would describe, the end justifies the means, even if the end is convincing you of a lie that keeps you trapped. The most curious thing is that he believes these stories as if they were facts. He doesn't question, doesn't investigate, doesn't observe. He simply accepts them, and from that, he begins to react emotionally. He becomes anxious about something that may not even mean that. He feels anger over an interpretation that may be wrong. Or he withdraws because of a judgment that was never made. It's as if he were fighting against shadows created by his own mind. And here comes a strategic detail: avoiding being hated. The mind tries to avoid pain, rejection, discomfort, but it does so by creating even more pain. A simple delay becomes disrespect. A mistake becomes personal failure. Silence becomes abandonment. And so he no longer lives reality. He lives distorted versions of it, created by this internal system that insists on interpreting everything as a threat. Now observe this in everyday life. He sends an important message, and the person takes a long time to respond. First arrow, delay. Second arrow, she doesn't care about me. I said something wrong. They're ignoring me. The result, anxiety, insecurity, impulsive behavior. Maybe he even sends another message trying to correct something that wasn't even wrong. Or he withdraws, creates distance, changes his attitude, all based on a story that was never confirmed. Do you realize the level of control this generates? It's a calculated use of force, but against himself. The mind creates the problem and then reacts to it as if it were real. And while he continues to confuse event with interpretation, fact with narrative, truth with assumption, a deeper doubt begins to emerge. If the greatest pain doesn't come from what happens, but from what he thinks about what happens, then who is really in control? He grows up believing there's something wrong with him. After all, why does his mind never stop? Why does there always seem to be a problem, even when everything is fine? But here's the twist that few see. His brain was never meant to make him happy. The goal was always something else: to survive. And survival, in its most basic logic, requires constant vigilance. It requires detecting threats, anticipating risks, imagining negative scenarios. It's a policy guided by reality, not by romantic ideals of peace and tranquility. His mind was molded to look for what could go wrong, not what's working. And when he understands this, something changes. Because he stops treating this pattern as a defect and begins to see it as a mechanism, an old, efficient mechanism, but completely out of step with the current world. The problem is that this system hasn't evolved at the same speed as the environment. Before, threats were physical: predators, hunger, immediate danger. Today, they are symbolic: the opinions of others, status comparison, fear of failure. But the brain reacts in the same way. It interprets criticism as an attack, a social judgment as a risk of exclusion from the group. And in the past, exclusion meant death. So it goes on alert. It creates scenarios, repeats thoughts, seeks control. This is where a kind of appearance of virtue comes in. It seems like it's being careful, analytical, strategic, but in reality, it's just reacting to a system that no longer distinguishes between real and imaginary threats. And the more it tries to solve everything by thinking, the more it feeds this cycle. Because for the brain, thinking about the problem is a sign that the problem is important. Now consider a practical detail. He receives criticism at work. Instead of analyzing it objectively, what can I adjust? His mind races. I'm going to get fired. I'm not competent. This confirms everything. The body reacts, emotion arises, and he goes into defense mode. Perhaps he avoids further exposure. Perhaps he overworks trying to prove something. Perhaps he simply freezes. All this because the brain is doing exactly what it was programmed to do: avoid risk. But here comes a strategic point that few master. Decisions based on real human nature require awareness of this mechanism, because if he doesn't understand this, he becomes a hostage. He acts as if every thought were a legitimate command, and then, without realizing it, he begins to live an entire life trying to put out fires that never existed. And at that moment, a question begins to form. If the brain is programmed to protect but not necessarily to tell the truth, to what extent can he trust what he thinks? There's a silent point he almost never notices, a space between the thought and the observer of the thought. And that's exactly where the turning point lies. Because until then, he lives as if everything that passes through his mind were absolute truth. If he thinks, "I'm not capable," he feels as if he were incapable. If he thinks it's going to go wrong, he reacts as if failure were inevitable. But this only happens because he merges with the thought. He doesn't observe, he becomes it. And this is where most people spend their entire lives without realizing it. There's a brutal difference between what appears in the mind and the person seeing it happen. And when this difference begins to become clear, the game changes completely. Because he stops being governed by that voice and begins to see it for what it really is, just an internal production. At first, this seems strange. After all, if he is not the thoughts, then who is he? The answer doesn't come in the form of a concept, but of experience. It's when he begins to notice that he can observe a thought without reacting automatically. A negative idea arises, and instead of believing it, he simply perceives, "Look at this again." Without struggle, without resistance, without judgment, just presence. And this is extremely strategic because it breaks an old pattern where each thought became an order. Here enters something that few master: constant adaptability. He doesn't try to control the mind. He learns not to be controlled by it. And over time, this distance between observer and thought begins to grow. What once seemed like an absolute truth now sounds like a suggestion, and often a bad suggestion. Now consider a simple example. He's about to do something important: record a video, start a project, talk to someone, and the thought arises: you're going to freeze up. Before, that was enough to make him back down. Now, he notices the thought and continues anyway. This changes everything, because action no longer depends on the absence of fear and begins to depend on clarity. He understands that thoughts are mental events, not mandatory commands. And this brings an absurd freedom. It's as if he finally has his own loyal army, instead of following orders from random generals inside his head. But this new level of awareness reveals something even more uncomfortable. If he is not his thoughts, why, for so long, did he need them to feel like someone? There's an uncomfortable truth he avoids facing. Part of him has become accustomed to pain, not because he consciously enjoys it, but because it offers something that seems valuable: identity. When he says, "My life has always been difficult, nobody understands me, everything is heavier for me," he's not just describing a reality, he's constructing a character. And this character has a clear role: to justify, protect, explain. It's a subtle form of politics guided by reality, not by ideals, the internal reality of someone who has learned that suffering is a way of existing. And here comes an almost Machiavellian point. It's better to be special and miserable than common and free. Because ultimately, giving up pain also means giving up the narrative he has constructed about himself. And that's more frightening than it seems. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic. he begins to interpret situations in ways that reinforce this identity. If something goes wrong, he confirms the belief. If something goes right, he minimizes it. It was luck. It won't last. It's as if there's an internal system filtering everything to maintain consistency with the story he already believes. And this isn't weakness. It's an unconscious strategy, a kind of calculated use of force, only directed inward. Because by maintaining this identity, he avoids greater risks. He doesn't need to really try. He doesn't need to expose himself. He doesn't need to deal with the possibility of failure without excuses. Pain becomes a shield. The victim becomes the main character. And any attempt to break free from this seems like a threat. After all, if he stops being the one who suffers, who will he be? Now observe this in practice. He wants to change his life, start something new, improve a habit. But a subtle thought arises. With everything I've been through, it's really difficult. It's more complicated for me. My situation is different. And that's it. He gains permission not to act, not consciously, but emotionally. This creates a dangerous cycle. The more he identifies with the pain, the more he maintains it. And the more he maintains it, the more it reinforces who he believes himself to be. It's a very well-disguised appearance of virtue. It looks like honesty. It looks like vulnerability. It even looks like depth. But in practice, it's imprisonment. And at some point, a silent unease begins to emerge. If this identity was built over time, can it also be abandoned? At some point, he begins to realize that what he calls self is actually a collection of repeated stories, a character constructed based on what he has lived, what others have said about him, what he has chosen to believe. I am like this. I've always been this way. This is part of me. But it isn't. This is just a script, and a script that has been reinforced so many times that it has become his identity. And here comes the rupture. To truly grow, he needs to be willing to let this character die. Not physically, of course, but symbolically. And this requires courage, because in practice it means giving up old certainties without any immediate guarantee of who he will become. It means abandoning the appearance of virtue that sustained his ego and facing the naked reality. Many of the things he defends about himself are just protective mechanisms. This process isn't pretty nor comfortable. On the contrary, it feels like loss. It feels like confusion. It even feels like regression. Because the ego reacts. It tries to maintain control, reclaim old patterns, repeat old narratives. It whispers, "Go back to what's safe. This isn't you. You're losing yourself." But in reality, it's the opposite. It's finding itself for the first time. And here there's a very clear, almost strategic logic to avoid being hated, including by itself. Because during this process, it might judge itself, criticize itself, feel that it's wrong for changing. But real change always involves discomfort. It always involves leaving old versions behind. And that only happens when it understands that it doesn't need to defend what no longer makes sense. It no longer needs to maintain a persona just because it spent years playing that role. Now think about something practical. He always saw himself as someone shy, insecure, indecisive, and for years he acted accordingly. But in a moment of awareness, he realizes this is not an essence, it's a learned pattern. And from then on, he begins to act differently, even with discomfort, even with fear. And each new action weakens the old identity. It's like dismantling a structure brick by brick, and little by little, something new emerges. Not a character, but a more real presence. Less based on history, more based on choice. This is Virtù and Fortuna in action. He doesn't control everything, but he responds consciously to what happens. And at that point, something also begins to change in the way he relates to the world, because By ceasing to sustain a false self, he begins to experience something he never truly had: freedom. But this freedom brings a new challenge. What happens when he finally gets out of his own head? When he finally begins to distance himself from the internal noise, something strange happens at first. Silence. And this silence is unsettling, because he has spent so much time being guided by thoughts that without them, it feels like something is missing. But little by little, this emptiness reveals itself as space. Space to perceive, to act, to exist without constant interference. And that's when the benefits begin to appear, not as abstract promises, but as practical effects. His presence changes. His gaze becomes firmer, his decisions more direct, his actions more consistent. There is a kind of silent magnetism that arises when someone is not lost within their own mind. And this has nothing mystical about it. It is simply the result of someone who is no longer reacting to every thought as if it were an order. It is someone who acts based on reality, not on distorted interpretations of it. In relationships, this becomes even more evident. He begins to truly listen without rehearsing responses while the other person speaks. He stops assuming intentions, stops creating unnecessary stories. This reduces conflict, increases connection, and eliminates that invisible wear and tear that came from over-interpretation. And here's a strategic point. Decisions based on real human nature require a clear reading of the environment, something impossible when the mind is too preoccupied with itself. By stepping outside his own head, he begins to perceive nuances, signs, behaviors that previously went unnoticed. It's as if he's spent years looking in a mirror, and now he's finally looking at the world. And this completely changes how he positions himself. Less reactive, more precise. Less emotionally scattered, more centered. And it has an effect that few people expect: the end of procrastination. Because procrastinating most of the time isn't laziness, it's overthinking. It's getting stuck in analyses, doubts, scenarios, until action loses momentum. When someone breaks free from this cycle, acting becomes simpler. Not because everything has become easy, but because they've stopped complicating things. A state emerges that many describe as flow, where they do what needs to be done without constant internal resistance. And this brings a kind of immunity to external manipulation, because those who aren't lost in their own minds aren't easily controlled by the minds of others either. They don't react to every opinion. They aren't shaken by every judgment. There's a stability that comes from within. And at this point, a new question begins to arise. If this state is possible, how can it be consistently trained? He may understand all of this intellectually and still remain trapped, because awareness is not a concept, it's a practice. And like any skill, it needs to be trained. Not just once, not when he feels like it, but consistently. This is where many fail. They think that simply perceiving it is enough, and that's it. Everything changes. It doesn't change. The mental pattern was built over years with repetition, emotion, and constant reinforcement. So, to dismantle it, the path is the same: conscious repetition. He needs to start observing his thoughts as one observes the movement of an army that no longer responds to his orders. He doesn't try to fight against it. He doesn't try to control it. He doesn't try to silence it. He just sees. And this just seeing is more powerful than it seems, because it breaks the automatic cycle between thinking and reacting. At first, it will seem useless. He'll notice a thought, and seconds later, he'll be caught up in it again. That's normal. It's part of the process. The training isn't about avoiding thoughts. It's about noticing when you've been pulled in by them and returning. Again, and again, and again. It's constant adaptability and practice. Each return strengthens awareness, like a muscle being worked repeatedly. And there are simple ways to start. For example, during the day, he can create small presence triggers. Every time he picks up his phone, he should stop for 3 seconds and observe what he's thinking. When entering a room, he should notice his breathing for a few moments. Before reacting to something, he should take a short pause and notice the impulse. These are small actions, but extremely strategic, because they begin to interrupt the autopilot. And if he wants to delve deeper, there are more structured practices. Meditation, for example, not as something mystical, but as direct attention training. Start with 5 minutes a day, simply observing your breath and noticing when your mind wanders. Reading also helps, but not just any reading. Books like The Power of Now or A New Earth present this distinction between mind and consciousness in a practical way. And most importantly, apply it. Because knowledge without application becomes just another useless thought. And here comes a silent, almost invisible principle, the calculated use of force. He doesn't try to change everything at once. He trains a little, but every day. And over time, something changes. Not explosively, but consistently. He begins to perceive before reacting. He begins to choose before acting. And at that point, control ceases to be an illusion and begins to become a real skill. Now let me confront you with something you might be avoiding. How many decisions have you failed to make because of thoughts that were never true? How many opportunities have you postponed because your mind convinced you it wasn't the right time? And most importantly, how long will you continue obeying a voice that has never built anything real in your life? Because deep down, you already understand. It's not about stopping thinking completely, that's impossible. It's about stopping submitting to every thought as if it were an order. It's about truly taking control. Decisions based on real human nature require courage, not perfection. They require action, not over-analysis. And here comes a silent, almost strategic principle: constant adaptability. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. You need to act despite how you feel. That's how the game changes. So I'll ask you a direct question. What are you going to do differently from now on? Are you going to continue living inside your head, repeating the same patterns? Or are you going to start testing this in practice? Today, now. Not tomorrow, not when everything is perfect, because it never will be. And if you've gotten this far, it's because something has already started to bother you inside, and that's good. It means you can no longer pretend you don't see it. If this content resonated with you, then do the following. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here you won't find pretty phrases to feel better. You'll find clarity to act better. And tell me in the comments, when did you realize you were living more in your mind than in your own life?